let's go back to the phones. I've got two other things I really want to get into here. I've got more on net neutrality and this Pocahontas phony baloney Consumer Protection Board and what it really was. I covered this extensively yesterday, but there's some update stuff on it today. But if I don't get to it, promise tomorrow. Here's Nathan in Monroe, New York. We head back to the phones. How are you doing, sir?
Very well. Thanks for taking my call, Rush.
Yes,
Rush,
sir.
I'd like to, going on your premise about the media cracking up, I think it needs to be helped along. And the way to do that is to point out this, that the product of liberalism is really the breeding ground for this problem. We've been told that rape is not really about sex, it's about power. Right. And liberalism is about power and increasing people in position who can leverage that power to abuse people in this way. And I think it would be very helpful. I know the establishment wouldn't do it, but I think it would be very helpful for us to point out that these people who are committing these offenses fit the exact mold who are told, commit these kinds of offenses. They're guys in power. They happen to be white guys in power. And lo and behold, they're all liberals. And lo and behold, liberalism leads to more guys.
This is interesting. Let me see if I understand what you're saying. You may really be onto something. Your premise starts with what, and by the way, this belief, this theory that rape or sexual abuse is not about sex, it's about power, can be traced back to a feminist author named Susan Brown Miller, who wrote a book in the 70s, and I forget the title of it, but if you wanted to date a feminist in the 70s, you had to read this. And you had to be conversant in it. I know because I did. But this is where the theorem was advanced that rape or sexual harassment is not about sex. It's about power. So your theory is that she's right and that liberalism is the breeding ground for this power and that we're actually seeing it on display. That the Charlie Roses and the Weinsteins and all these guys are not doing this really for sex. They're doing it for the exertion of power over people.
Well, if for no other reason, then their power affords them the opportunity. So liberalism you could point out, or you could make the case that it is self-fulfilling in this way, that people get powerful and people start to misbehave because they're powerful. And it's all on their side, really, right now.
Yeah, but how does that distinguish from, say, conservatives in power? I mean, power's power, no matter who has it and where it is. How would you distinguish it?
As a political ideology, conservatism is technically the antidote, where we're trying to reduce the institutional power and give that back to the individual where they are more accountable. Whereas, liberalism, you're building bureaucracy and you're putting people in the position and by virtue of that fact, putting them in the position to abuse women who work for them.
Yeah, okay. And you know how it extends even further? Then you use that power to put a net around everything so that the word of it doesn't get out. For example, how about this news that there have been $15 million in payouts to silence women who have been abused or harassed by members of Congress? And there's now a big movement on to have these people named and identified. It is the power structure that keeps their names hidden. It is the power structure that keeps their deeds and activities hidden. But you're right about all this. Liberalism is about the pursuit of power for the purposes of using it against other people and for the advancement of your own agenda. While liberalism portrays itself as fair and tolerant and open-minded and understanding and gentle and snowflakey and all of that. It's an interesting point. I like it. The quest to further enable Americans to understand liberalism and how liberalism actually breeds the circumstances for all of this liberal, male, abusive, power-related behavior. By the way, the Susan Brown Miller book title, Against Our Will. And I'm not kidding you. If you wanted to date a feminist woman in the 70s, you had to know about this book. And you had to fake like you understood it and agree with it. And even then, the dates were blah. I mean, who wants to talk about this stuff? But back then for women, this was emancipatory stuff. Who calls it the Time Magazine, the book that changed the whole what structure? Sexual discussion structure of the country. Yeah. Well, in their world, it probably was. But see, Time Magazine's world is not the American world. Maybe at one time it was when Henry Luce ran it, but Time Magazine's never been a magazine forward about America. Time Magazine's been forward about the establishment for I don't know how long. The U.S. Open. Take a look at the celebrities of the U.S. Open, the tennis tournament. Golf, totally different. The U.S. Open tennis tournament. You'll find Matt Lauer sitting in front of Charlie Rose, sitting behind, who knows? I mean, it's the New York Boston quarter, Washington corridor establishment. It's one of the things they do. And then they have their polo tournament out in the Hamptons, and then they do their whatever else they do out there. But they wherever they go, either Manhattan or the Hamptons or Washington, they all gather and do the same things. And you can't be part of it. And the news media is all focused on what's going on within that world. And what happens in that world happens to be what's happening in America, in their world, except that it isn't. Back in a sec.